Morning, everyone. Thanks for watching. My name is Richard Miller. This is Never Not Here, and you're very welcome to be here. And summer 2010, we're having a lot of talks, and I hope we have an interesting one for you this morning. And so please help me welcome Guru Swami G. So, hello.
Hello, namaste.
Namaste, and it's great to have you with us.
It's good to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
I never know exactly how to start, but sometimes I start out just by talking about what's really basic. And I guess the most basic thing you can say is that something is here. And whether we know what that is or not, I don't know.
Indeed, something is here. Sometimes not always apparent to some.
Right. So then, maybe one of the first things that we notice if we get interested in looking at life is that something is here, and also I have a take on that. I try to describe what it is, or I try to know, in my own self, my own, I could call it mind, or somehow I'm giving an interpretation to what's here. And we kind of realize that there's that dichotomy. There's those two things, and how close they are to each other, we really don't know.
Well, yeah, there's a big difference between the perception that a me has in the revolving thoughts and that awareness versus the awareness of the primal is when the thoughts still and the thoughts stop. And that apparency is quite different.
Right. That's exactly where that's exactly where I wanted to go, because I wanted to say that if we look out into the world, one of the first things we notice is that, and we can even looking back in our own experience, or our memory of our experience, and we can notice that so many people, the thought about something and the something seem to be seamless, there's really not that big of a difference. But the testimony is that there's a huge difference. I mean, it's like what they say is reading the menu or eating the meal, right?
Exactly. This is one of the problems that I have with a lot of the satsang teachers, that when everything falls away, then you can say at that point, yes, there was never anything to get and it's always right here. But when you're in the delusion, yes, there is something to get. It's not apparent, even though it's always been there and it will always be there. When one is not aware of it and is being run by a mind that's in turmoil and being driven, then it might as well be dark instead of light.
Right. In other words, even if nothing's there, and even if nothing's there when somebody's in turmoil, I guess we're playing a game called projected mind, and let's play it, in a nice way, let's have a lot of fun with it, and let's in a way cater to those people's perceptions that are somehow focused on themselves, let's say.
What happens is there's a real disconnect, and people think that when the realized being is speaking about being in that, one is always in that, and one cannot be separate from that, then ego takes it and wants to embrace that from the ego perspective. And that's impossible.
Right, okay. Exactly. But in a way we could say, well, that nasty ego is doing its trick again, but in a way that's all that person has, right? That's just what they think is real.
Exactly, because that's their take, and as long as one is in the mind of duality, then there are as many versions of truth as there are people on the planet, because they have their quote-unquote truths. But when everything falls away, there's only one primal reality and one truth. Any realized being is within the same cognitive identification and reality. Whereas when one is in the duality of mind, one is not within the same cognition. Okay.
Right. So then, of course, we're all in reality, and that's what's so often spoken to. And then some of us, I guess it's just our attention that's turned, it either can be settling in full centeredness with what is, or somehow it's off on neediness and how to fix things?
Well, most in duality, the perception is on a me that's separate, and they're looking to find some sort of a conjunction or some type of a joining. And they think that there's going to be this identification with Para Brahman or absolute or whatever you want to say, that they're going to have an awareness of it and yet keep the personal identity. But that doesn't happen. When everything falls away, then there is no me and there has been no journey. Okay, and all of the perceptions and all of the journey to that point one sees was an illusion. But when one is caught in the illusion and in the delusion, then there's a feeling of separation and something to get and somewhere to go. Yes.
So, I mean, yeah, we can. I think it's going to be certainly interesting to speak a little bit about, from that person's perception that has his attention on, am I doing it good enough? Am I getting better? Or, I mean, we can talk about that. I wanted to take the conversation. Okay, well, one thing is I might preface by saying that, of course, a lot of our viewers are pretty much into non-duality, and a lot of them think, okay, well, why would you start talking about what what most people perceive, and but I like to do it anyhow, so they don't always go for it, But I wanted to paint a picture anyhow, and then ask a couple of questions, And let's just say, for real simplicity, let's play a numbers game, and it doesn't have to be right, We'll just throw some numbers around and say, okay, for real simplicity, let's say 6 billion so-called individuals or apparent individuals live on the planet Earth. And let's just say, for the heck of it, and see how we like it, 1 in 1,000 are seekers. In other words, like, for some reason, 1,000 people are here, 999 of them turn away from this, what we're talking about, or otherwise it doesn't even register, And one of them says, I want to investigate this.
Right. And there's a lot of humanity that's not seeking in any way, shape, or form. Absolutely.
Yeah, and so if we don't like that, that means that there's 6 million seekers. And when we say, no, that's too little, there's probably 18 million, then we'll say, okay, 3 out of 1,000 hang in there, and 997 of them split. We don't know exactly what that is, but, just to play with some numbers for a while. Okay, so then let's just say, okay, out of those 3 people, I don't even know if that sounds right. Like, is there 18 million seekers or whatever, but let's just go one more time, and let's just say, okay, 18 million of these people are what should I say? They're, they investigate these teachings in one way or another, and then out of those, 1 out of 1,000 really gets it, and then that would mean there would be, I guess, 18,000 enlightened beings on this planet. I don't know. Is that far off, or is that, or do we care? Maybe we're just playing with numbers anyhow.
I don't think the numbers matter, really.
Yeah.
Because you have seekers and then you have seekers. I mean, there's a lot of people that say they're seekers, but really they're not looking for realization. Not at all. They may say they're looking for realization, but in the end, it's not what they're looking for, or what they would be willing to let go of duality for.
Yeah, but I mean, like, it's just like what we said in the beginning, like, people only have available to them what they have available. I mean, that's what their set of values is, such that they're seeking a better life, or they're seeking, like, however it comes out, they're doing the best they can. So that's their way of seeking. And then tomorrow, or whenever a light bulb pops off, then they'll say, oh, I don't need that either, wow. And maybe then that's part of the stage of it, right?
Right. But the point is that there are a lot of people that think that they're seeking realization, but really at this point in time, no, they are not. And so what the numbers are of enlightened beings, I can't say. I think there's more than people recognize that are out there. And but you don't find them on every street corner, unfortunately.
Right, not all of them talk, right? I mean, some of them just live a life, and only a few of them present and teach and whatever.
Right. And then some that teach, they teach and they speak of realization, but they don't give tools how to get from point A to point B, or maybe they don't understand how they got from point A to point B within their own journey. So there's a lot of different types of realized beings. Some are gurus, some are sages, some just speak of the journey that are, sages that speak of it, but they're not gurus, don't have tools to give others to break through conditioned mind, tools to help to aid for the mind to still. Because the mind has to come to a point of stillness in order to open that gate and that door to the absolute reality. Because moving mind is duality.
It seems like that for sure, but I mean, certainly there are stories where people were maybe very anxious and very, their life and their mind was totally in static, it was just going so fast. And, but somehow there was a breakthrough or an enormous gift, or somehow there was a breakdown, let's say. And then what was left, when the me collapsed, there's many of these stress stories, right? Was a breakthrough. Maybe they didn't know what it meant or what it was, but I mean, somehow.
Well, then sometimes they can have a glimpse, but then the mind comes back and covers it over again, and they have a remembrance of what it was. So there's a lot of different layers and levels to saying realization as well. And this is one thing people can check out in the Tripura Rahasya that speaks of that. Sometimes there is a great falling away, but sometimes then the conditioned mind will come back and cover it over, and it can be spoken of, but there's still a driving force at that point. Then there are some that enter into realization, everything deconstructs, and the mind stays still, and it doesn't come back. It doesn't cover over again. And then for that one, it is liberation from that point forward. So there's a lot of different layers, a lot of different levels to this as to what is the experience. And yes, I'm not saying that one has to come to stillness of mind and that it's always, blissful, the journey, and so easy and the road smooths out. And I'm not saying that at all. One can have great turmoil and great distress up to the moment of realization, until the moment that everything deconstructs and falls away into that void, into that present is, which is unchanging and absolute.
Well, I suppose there's always going to be great turmoil too. Who knows? It's just no me to own it. In other words, like Jesus was hung on a cross, that was pretty turmoil. Or, I think a lot of masters were actually drawn and quartered, or, actually tortured or whatever. And,
nobody says that the road is easy. It's never easy. I never tell anybody that it's an easy path. Never. Because, the ones like Christ showed what one goes through. One goes through the wilderness. One goes through the testing. One goes through all of that. One has to lay down their life willingly. All of those things happen along the journey.
In other words, without a me, you've already laid down your life in a way.
Well, without a me, you've already laid down your life. But when he went through that journey, he showed that. He showed what that process is in a viable way that can be seen by humanity. This is the process. This is what happens. This is what one goes through. Yes.
Before we get too far away from my little story, like my little numbers game, the questions I wanted to ask was what's the deal? Why do 996 people walk away from, or don't even register that we're out here, that questioning life and seeing into life is actually a very practical thing. And question number two is, how could it be that nobody gets it, nobody awakes, like 3 out of 1,000 or whatever.
Yeah, because they're caught in the dream. Because they're so wrapped up in the externalizations that they don't quiet enough to look within. And it's the same reason that people don't like silence. If they're with somebody else and there's a lull in the conversation, they have to just say anything to fill up that space. They don't want to encounter themselves. They're afraid to encounter themselves, what they're going to find. But one has to be willing to encounter yourself. One has to be willing to encounter all the conditionings of mind that's driving one in order to see it and break through.
I suppose this is my question, because the testimony and the masters talk about an essential experience of, I hate to say oneness and stuff like that, but anyhow, let's say some kind of a unity of consciousness, or something about consciousness is so same everywhere that you can't really individualize it. And so then therefore all these individual expressions are somehow me. And yet then with the same breath you could say, well, okay, those guys aren't ready, or they're wrapped up, but that's me, that's not ready, or something like that. Or how do you that's one thing I like to try to iron out, is when the communication somehow sounds one way, and then in the same time it sounds the other way, and then somehow the listener just accepts that as, okay, yeah, duality is part of it, or is it?
Oh yeah, that's what's hard, and that's what's difficult for any realized master, realized being. For them, it's just apparent, it's primary, it's like breath. Nobody needs to tell you about breath. It just is there, and you're breathing, okay? But unfortunately, when you're dealing with those that are still in the mind of duality, they only have a reference point of duality, and they hear it from the point of a me. And they want to use what is being said as a way to support their me. They will pick and choose things out of what's being said that will be able to help their story, to keep their story intact. And the point is, in any spiritual journey, that me story has to deconstruct in some way, shape, or form. Okay?
I like it when you said pick and choose, because that's what I'm noticing about, for instance, like on our website, there's forums, open forums, and people get into dialogues. And, just talking me, I do an open mic series where I just talk to anyone, and also just talking to the teachers or guests or however you want to say it. I realize I'm picking and choosing. In other words, I'm understanding what I understand, and then what I don't understand, I kind of let pass and wait, and either I object to it, or maybe if I'm give everyone the benefit of the doubt, I just kind of say, okay, well, I'll understand that later. And and I notice it the other way around too, because a lot of times I ask questions. I'm not saying it's happening now, but a lot of times I ask questions and I get other answers. That somebody comes with a preconception that I'm here to talk and you're here to listen, and so then my questions aren't really, it seems to be important to get some message out. But really, there probably is no importance. What is important anyhow?
Well, this is one of the difficulties in also being a guru, and you have to understand that the people who you're working with and what you're saying is not always what they're hearing. They're hearing something different.
Maybe never.
You get with them and you get to start to dialogue, and you find out what they're hearing is really 180 degrees away from what's being said and what's trying to be imported and imparted to them. And so again, this is a part of the journey, and what is the difference with a guru versus somebody who's just up there and giving satsang. Not to say there's something wrong with people that are up giving satsang and speaking of what the truth of this reality is. But the difference is when you are a guru and you are committed to working with sadhakas, you have to come, and the old traditional way is that the gurus get to know the sadhakas they're working with, because you have to understand how they're thinking, how they're processing, what they're hearing, what they're getting, what they're not getting. And then you go from there to try to break through the conditioned mind and where they're stuck, so that they can, so that their story can deconstruct.
So I have to congratulate you on your patience,
Oh, Lord, it does take patience. it's not a job that people think that being a guru is a big glamorous thing. It's not a glamorous thing when one is really a traditional guru. And I'm not talking about a world guru that wants name and fame and up on stages and this and that. This is something different. This is something different.
So, all of us, many of us for sure are in touch with some point in our own heart that wants to share what makes our life easy and say, I want your life to be easy too, or try it out, I don't want you to do what I did for sure. But, try looking, try investigating, it's worthwhile, or give a testimony.
Well, exactly. I think that humanity wants to share. I think that there comes a big point on the path where people want to share. And unfortunately, a lot of the people that want to share are still the people that are in pain. But I tell people, if you really want to help humanity, stick with your practices, stick with your investigation, stick with things until everything deconstructs, and then you'll have a map on how to get people from point A to point B.
When you say people that are still in pain, well, I mean, also we made reference to how somebody's path unfolded. And so then I noticed that people tend to teach that, somewhat similar to what happened to them. In other words, creating a subtle expectation that, okay, someone might say there's a burning, or there's a dark night of the soul, or everything has to burn away, there's huge losses or something. Well, that was how it happened to them. But, I don't know if it's universal. I think it seems like everybody could have.
I don't think so. No. In my own path, I can only reference that yes, there was a great darkness, a deep that suffering aspect to it. For many years, there was a lot of tribulation, a lot of suffering, a lot of but that was just part of my journey. And hopefully, I can give enough that some people don't have to go through that. They don't have to go through that pain. And that's one reason that people will make this available and want to get this out. And hopefully it can give enough wisdom out there to save some people from having to go through that turmoil. When you don't have a guru in place, a lot of it, like for my own journey, I can only talk about was 30 years of going through blindness and blind alleys and difficult places that I just didn't have the knowledge or wisdom about to know that I didn't have to go there. And so, so one just tries to give what they can. But I don't think that everyone has to go through that crisis, deep, dark night of the soul. Not everyone has to go through that great suffering. I have students, some that didn't go through it, some that do, so you cannot make a blanket statement anywhere.
Right.
And everyone's journey is different. Like here, I teach the path of Kundalini. For everyone, it's different. So a lot of people will have a lot of phenomena. Some will have minimal phenomena, but you can't say one way is better than the other or one way is more valid than another. It's simply not. Everyone's journey is different.
Right. So, in a way, like a lot of people I know, since I'm of a certain age, and maybe many people also from the street just think that this is AARP type of a phenomena. When you get to a certain age, you think, what's going on here? And but actually, we run into people that are very young, in their 20s and maybe even younger. And so then I'm very interested in that phenomena and actually talking with them and seeing what their take is on it. And I have tremendous reticence of trying to paint a picture that there's 30-year path and there's lots of pain and stuff, and try to imprint that on somebody that's just so young and vibrant and
It depends on what their past life experience is. You pick up where you left off. We've been searching for many, many lifetimes, and somebody can come in and have many lifetimes of searching, and it just something spontaneously opens that, and they pick up where they left off. So you can't say it's based on age. Somebody can come in that's very young and be awakened to continue their journey, and they can have a great depth of experience. Whereas somebody that's older could be just beginning their journey. So again, you can't say that it has to be one or the other.
Sometimes, just going back to kind of like where we started, and we said that, oh, something's here. And then there's also, hey, we noticed that there's an interpretation of something here. And then we start to call that interpretation our story, our storyline, or the way we explain things. And sometimes those explanations, actually are kind of like the root of our problem. I guess they are, because we have an explanation that I'm here and that I'm in trouble and that I need this and I need that. And all those explanations kind of like are the root of our bondage. But then there's other explanations that seem to be stories or allegories or metaphors or pointings, we call them. And somehow it's still a story, but it makes things easier. Like you said, some people in our past life maybe got very close to understanding. And so that whole past life thing, well, especially for people that don't experience that, is a mega story, And so is that helpful? I guess that's helpful, and sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't.
Yeah, no, this is not to say people need to explore their past lives or understand it or anything. It has nothing to do with it. And once again, that can be another big story if people are trying to find, oh, what was my past life? It's another big story. All of the stories need to deconstruct eventually. And you can't, I see a lot of people that are doing spiritual paths, and they just exchange one set of conditionings for a better set of conditionings. All the conditionings need to deconstruct again as well. So it's not about changing the story from one story to a better story. Okay, that might be great for duality, and nothing wrong with that if you're wanting to remain in duality and you have no interest in going forward fully to realization. But if one is serious about wanting to get off the wheel of karma and go fully forward to realization, then you can't be just changing one story for a better story. Okay?
So for a while, that's kind of maybe even helpful in the way that a confusing story somehow creates a static in the mind, and that static is the only thing that attention can fall on. Like, oh my gosh, I'm not getting it, or what. Somehow, and in a way, we never get it, because, like we're saying, that isness is not explainable.
The me is never going to get it. But that's always the hope of the me, that I'm going to get realization, and there'll be another feather in my cap, and it's sort of like I at that point look at me, but no me gets in there. That's the fallacy. The me deconstructs, and then again, as one starts to deconstruct, people at that point may start pulling back, because there is the experience of a death experience that comes, and it feels like really that one is going to die, and people want to have that self-preservation. So again, I say that it's not always easy, the path, and one has to be willing to face that death before death, like the Bible says, like Christ said. One has to face that death before death in order to live. Before, all I can say is before realization, there was existence. I was existing, and after then, finally, you start to live and breathe and come out of the dream. It truly is like waking up. All one can say is, like, when you have the dream at night, while you're in the dream, it appears so real. If there's a tiger coming that's going to eat you, you're going to scream and you're going to run, and the heart will beat faster in the midst of the dream, and it will seem absolutely real.
Yeah, your legs might even move in bed, like you're running.
Exactly. The whole thing takes place. But when you wake up, where did it go? And the same thing with realization. That's why it's termed waking up. When you wake up, the whole dream of your past, of all your trauma, of all your sorrow, of all your accomplishments, everything goes in one moment. and everything changes, and yet nothing has changed. And it's the great paradox. It's like the great cosmic joke. You sit and laugh, and it's kind of like the commercial. I could have had a V8, and then it seems so simple. But when one is in the midst of the journey, it's not simple. And I think that this is unfortunately something that happens, because when everything falls away, it's just so simple and so just point blank in the face. You can't get away from it. And so that becomes that realized being, that sage, that guru's reality. And so they speak, from that, because it's just what's absolutely there and apparent, and then they forget what the difficulty and the turmoil of the journey was, and they want to throw away the baby with the bathwater and say, well, there's nothing to get, there's nowhere to go. But yes, for the one that's in duality, and most assuredly there is still somewhere to go, even though it's there and it's always been there, and if without it you would have no life, as long as it's not perceived, as long as it's not understood. And I'm not talking about intellectually. You'll never get it intellectually, no matter how many times you want to self-affirm I'm that. It does nothing to aid one getting out of suffering. One has to do the journey and deconstruct the conditioned mind and the ego for that freedom and liberation, which is always apparent and which is always present, maybe not apparent to those that are still in the moving mind of duality. They still have somewhere to go. There is still something to get. And there is a way, though, to go forward and make that journey to that which is always present.
We're talking about this apparent me, and we're saying like he can do whatever he can perceive, whatever he can perceive. Something about his thought-based perceptions are his in his tool bag, right? And so then that's his tool. That's the tools that he can work with. And then he comes to you, and you give him some other tools, and it's still him that's working with those tools, and it's still him that has the idea that I'm going to deconstruct myself. Somehow I'm an ego, then I'm going to deconstruct my ego, and so then he sets off to use these tools, and his mind does still and stuff like that. But in the end, as you said, everything has to go. Everything has to deconstruct, so the tools have to deconstruct too, I guess.
Well, the tools are there to help to deconstruct things, and the guru is there as a catalyst for your journey. They're not going to do the journey for you. I can't eat your meal. You have to eat your meal yourself to get the benefit of it. The only thing the guru can do is give some ways, means, methodologies, and to be there as a support system to say, yes, this way is beneficial, this is a blind alley, this will get you nowhere, and so that's what the guru is there to aid and help with the sadhaka's journey. But to make no mistake, the guru can't do it for you. Although there is great benefit if one is taking darshan, because the closer one gets to their guru, the more transmission takes place, and the transmission again helps to still the mind, helps to break through layers also. So yeah, it's a lot of work that needs to be done, and one has to be vigilant, and they have to want it. Like many of the masters say, you have to want it more than the next breath of air when you're being drowned. You have to really have your total focus more on the inward journey than the externalized drama of duality.
Now we're talking about, it seems like we're talking about three phases. Like, of course, we've got intellect, and our thoughts, and like our individual so-called understanding as our intellectual grasping, let's say. And then there's some kind of a doing, because like we're doing a practice and we're doing things. And we're doing a meditation, maybe we're claiming it, maybe we even taste something about the eternal or this moment, and somehow we say, oh, I had a good meditation, and so somehow we're not separating what, in fact, that meditation was the absence of I. We're not getting that hint. And then now we're talking about a third thing, is when you spoke of it as transmission, or somehow there's there's more than going on than just a mind. So then let's just say exactly what that is. I mean, like transmission, I don't care for that word too much for personally, because I mean, it sounds like an engineering fact, like that things there's a surplus of energy here and it goes to where there's a negative energy hole and it jumps the gap. But I'm not so sure there's really a jump or anything physical moving across. Or what does it mean, transmission?
Transmission, how to explain transmission? It's very difficult to explain, just as it's very difficult to explain realization to a mind in duality. There's nothing there to grasp onto. But all I can say is transmission is when something is enlivened within, and then for some reason I'm not an engineer, I'm not a physicist, I can't give you the mechanics of it. I don't know the mechanics of it. I only know the reality of it, that it works and it does take place. But this energy of Kundalini does work. It is an energy that starts turning in on the consciousness and starts dredging up all of the past things to be looked at. It brings up everything to be in your face 24/7. You can't just pick it up and put it down. It's and so at that point it can be beneficial. But what happens when there's a transmission from the guru is that when one is around that guru, for some reason, the energy works and it goes through the system, and it does aid to still the mind. It does aid to move things along much more rapidly for that seeker. I can't give you the mechanics of it. I wish I could. I don't know. I'm not going to profess to say I know how it works. I don't. I don't have the answers to that. I just know simply that it does.
So then the three things I was talking about, the cognition and the action doing and the presence, being in presence of even a group, like the whole all the devotees, together. Somehow there seems to be a transmission of that too.
Well, it heightens the energy. When there are multiple people in the room, there's a heightened energy. Absolutely. The more people you get, the more energy is there at a time. Yeah, so it becomes more palpable. But you're right, there are stages in it. One has to first have a basic intellectual understanding, of things, or something that the mind can grasp and then kind of let go of. And then there's the beginning stages where you think that you're the doer, I'm the doer. And to some point, one is putting things into motion. One has to put in things into motion, but then it happens by grace. One says it happens by grace because it's not by your own efforts and doership that you're going to get there. Because in the end, like I said, you can also say there's nowhere to get. But just that eternal begins to blossom, become more apparent, more forward, where it's known. And the me-ism goes in the background, starts going in the background, one enters into a witness state where there's more of a buffer zone, so you can see what's coming up and the actions that are coming up and can get questioned deeper. Then one goes into a spontaneous self-inquiry. I'm not talking about a mental start out. I'm going to say, who am I and what am I? Because what one gets back at that point is, again, another lot of definitions. I'm talking about a self-inquiry that arises, which is spontaneous. It comes at a point in the journey. Okay. So it comes, step by step by step by step. The journey unfolds.
Let's talk a little bit more about this doership, because then that's what we get into with practices, and so then somehow doership is part of our mental apparatus, like it's our interpretation that what we did. I mean, I believe it takes a memory to create doership, because you got to remember when it was undone to say that now it's done, so I must have done it. I must have did it, and so then, when people, realize beings do share that, in a way, in this vertical dimension, nothing is happening, and so then this doing is like in this mental horizontal realm, and maybe it's really a figment of your imagination, or they call that an illusion. So then, really doing, you were saying maybe it sets something into motion, but maybe it doesn't. Maybe that motion is there already. And that's a great confusion, because people get to this stage and they kind of like take non-doership, like I'm not the doer, as doing nothing, which is a doership, like stopping doing, and
Right. Yeah, they have the confusion about not being the doer. You can put something into motion. And just like if you're going to get up and get a job, you have to get up and get a job. You have to put it into motion.
You have to read the paper, and you have to kind of like make a few phone calls, right?
In this world of duality, but then you are not the creator of it in the end. You're not the sustainer of things, so one then has to let go and know that the rest of it happens by grace. It takes place by grace. And then when all falls away, there's no longer a doer. Things happen in a spontaneous way. There's no thought about it, no preconception, no, doership. When one is in the mind of duality, then there's thought. There's thought about, I have to do this, or I have to put this into motion. But the further one goes, the more that thought process starts to dissolve and starts to go into just awareness, pure awareness, versus this driving thought. Again, it's another part of the journey. And as long as people are in the mind of construct and in the mind of duality and in the motion of mind, then they have to have something to do. If you just sit on a log, it's never going to happen.
Somehow the doership is actually part of the grace. I mean, like it is what's happening, or it is the gift, like I get a paper, I call up some people, I ask for a job, I make my resume, all those things are the grace, and then the fact that people sit on a log, that is another kind of a doing that is kind of like artificial, that I don't know, I'm just saying this. I don't know if that's where I want to go with this, but confusions are kind of things that I like to talk about, because then people can maybe put those confusions down and just say, I don't know.
Well, there are a lot of confusions. There may be a point in the path where one does have to just sit on a log, and has to let go of part of the doing, So, yeah, but once again, you can't say what's viable for the beginning of the path is viable for the middle or the end of the path. At that point, something else is needed. Something else. There's a different part of the journey that one proceeds through. If you never start on a journey, if you don't step out, you won't go anywhere. You have to make the step. You have to make the step. And so the point is just simply that, again, one can say, I'm already that, there's nothing to get and do nothing. But as long as you're in suffering, that's not going to stop the suffering. It's simply not going to do it, and it's not going to deconstruct anything. It sounds good at the time, and maybe it's a good base for ego for a time, but then sometimes it becomes an egotistical practice when one says, I'm already that, and wants to equate the me with God, or with that, because a lot of the confusion arises in that. A lot of confusion.
So me can be very subtle, I guess.
It can. I mean, you see, unfortunately, you see some of the not so stellar gurus that get into a bunch of sexual stuff, get into a lot of a misidentification. Maybe they've had some glimpse but then the me comes back. And then they wrap this, this is around a me. And then they go off on a tangent and they fall even further than they were to begin with. They're in another delusion. And then that's not beneficial for anyone, unfortunately.
I've had some exposure to, let's call it gurus, let's say, and then I've actually been on pretty strict or strong ashrams and really seen a large group, let's say, of the brahmachari, which are their first line of defense or whatever, I don't know. But I mean, and I've seen these guys, and they're lovely, lovely guys and gals too, and they're really empty. There's really no me there, and there's really not much of it, anything there. It's just like this ball of energy that goes, and does whatever wants to be done around there. But in another way, they've got a giant me, 10 times stronger than their old me, and that's the guru and the ashram, and that's really apparent. You don't have to be any kind of a psychoanalyst or an expert to see that. And also, it seems like the only ones that ever, I don't know how you become a guru. You just have to declare it, right? You have to just profess it, or somehow you just know it, and then you just say it, right? In other words, what I'm asking is like, none of these people ever teach or anything until they break away, and they just, for some reason, either good or bad, they're away from this guru, and then.
Yeah, no, I'm not talking about self-proclaimed gurus. In my case, I'm not a self-proclaimed guru. I had a guru, and my guru saw that realization was entered, and at that point, I was given the admonition to go out and become a guru, to be a guru. I did not self-proclaim. And I don't believe that anyone should be out really self-proclaiming. Things may fall away, and you may be a sage, but maybe you don't have the tools to get somebody from point A to point B. There's a difference in being a sage and having, being living in the reality and be able to speak about the reality. But there's a difference in being a guru and being a Satguru and having the tools to get people from point A to point B. There's a big difference in that. And I'm not talking about, people that go up and just self-proclaim to say they're gurus. And there have been many that have self-proclaimed. So even some of the great big name gurus, I could name a few that self-proclaimed. And humanity wasn't, it wasn't a great thing. We'll just put it that way. But no, I'm not talking about self-proclaiming, going out and say, I've got this, and now I'm going to give it to everybody. No.
So in other words, a guru always is a product of a line or a lineage.
To some point, but it doesn't mean that every guru is from a strict lineage. No, I'm not saying that. There are some, that they've been with a master, a realized master. Doesn't necessarily mean that there was a huge lineage in place. No.
But you're saying, if I understand it correctly, is that you need a blessing, or somebody has to ask you to, go out and teach.
Well, I'm saying that there has to be a confirmation of realization. There should be a confirmation of realization, and the only one that understands what is a realized being is another realized being. There are many, many places along the way where things seem to fall away, or things seem to open up and you get glimpses and you think that that's it. There are many places you could self-proclaim and want to come, proclaim realization, but it's not realization. You're still in an illusion and delusion, and it's not realization, and things have not stabilized, and you want to go forward and go out and teach.
But if things have not stabilized, you will recognize that, right? Because you will say, over the years, things will change. The change will still be happening, or will you be in some kind of a stasis?
Yeah, not necessarily. It might not be recognized because you don't know the difference. This is why, that it's always been said within the traditions, that it should be recognized, and it should be, because even though when things fall away, there's a deepening that happens. There's a deepening from the initial stage of everything falling away. Then there are still more stages to go through. There is more settling to take place. There's more wisdom that needs to come. And so, yeah, it's more of a process than people realize. There are many, many places in the midst of the journey that you can think that that's it. I've gotten this glimpse and it's so expanded, and I see God in everyone, and I see God within me, but that's oneness. That's not realization. There's still at that point further to go. But that's another big identification that can happen, and people want to proclaim realization at that point, but that's not yet realization.
I I thought it would be really obvious because, like when you say a deepening, even in my life, I would say there's a deepening every month, maybe every week. And I thought that that would just be happening for everybody. I'm not saying that I'm any way realized, or I'm not trying to self-proclaim or anything like that. But I just thought that the deepening is just part of what is, and that it would be obvious to everybody that there's a deepening going on. But I mean, tell us a little bit more, if it's worth saying, or if it just adds more confusion, I don't know, but more about the difference between oneness experience and a realization.
Well, in oneness, there's still a subtle me that's one with something. And there's this something that's divided, yet it's all whole as one. In realization, there is no subdivision of anything, not possible. There is no me there, and there is no subdivision. One doesn't see the world as subdivided. One is no longer seeing through the eyes of duality. It's a total shift, and it's difficult again to explain to somebody that's in the midst of the mind of duality what the difference is. When you're speaking of it, it might seem very similar, but it's not similar at all once that direct experience of that is entered.
Yet you can operate in the world, so that, I mean, you see that, oh yeah, that's a chair, that's a table, that's my driver's license. Oh yeah, this is a guy making a left turn. I'm going to miss him because I'll go over to the right. And you can drive and all those things, right? I mean, that it just comes back to you and say, oh yeah, of course.
It's natural. Yeah, it's spontaneous. What needs to take place spontaneously happens. But yes, one can enter the point where the mind stills. There is no driving, running mind any longer. There is no more of this mental chatter. There's none of that remains. One does enter that point.
So that's just that there's no interest in that anymore. There's the chatter, but the essential meaningless of that chatter is totally clear, and so then there's really no interest whatsoever in entertaining that.
There's hardly any chatter ever. There is one point where one is in that awareness, and there might be the background chatter and stuff going, yeah. And I've heard teachers talk about it. Well, the thoughts are not the problem, I'm just not paying attention to them or whatever. There's something more primary, but comes a point where even those chattering thoughts go, that they actually go. They go. It's not that one is no longer focusing on them and they're in the background or something. No, it goes. It can go. But again, this comes in time. This comes in time. This what can be said. Still process. It just progresses. Yeah.
We talk about an irrevocable knowing, like I just, that occurs. And then sometimes this occurs with an experience that can be remembered, and it was like, a mind-blowing experience happened, and we get a lot of stories like that. Can it ever be where there's really just so little or so no experience whatsoever that, it's just so totally continuous with the old life, that it just kind of rolls and gradually just evolves, and there it is, boom. Can realization just come sneak up on you?
I don't know why it couldn't. I can't say that was the case here. It was very apparent, it was between night and day when it took place, when everything fell away. And everything changed and nothing changed, Once again, the dichotomy of it, one is always amazed at looking at that. But, it happens differently for different people. For some, it's a gentle falling away, and for others, it's just boom, everything deconstructs. So again, you can't say it's a blanket one type of an experience that takes place. And yes, there are, along the way, there can be glimpses that are had. People can have glimpses of it. But then again, like I said, the ego can pull back, and the thoughts can start going again and construct another ego around it. And one can speak of the experience. But at that point, still, there's not that total freedom and liberation that's possible.
The reason I asked that question is that oftentimes a seeker's waiting, waiting, right? And saying like, where is that yes? Where is that ultimate yes that I can't deny, And so then they grab this experience or the stories of these experiences, and it's like night and day, It didn't happen like night and day to me yet. So then there's that no that's there that I'm not it. It's not. I'm not realized. I'm not. And so what can we say about that no or the need of that yes? I mean, is there such a need?
Well, there is a need for everything, like I said, to fall away and deconstruct. And one can cling to an old experience, but you have to be willing to let go of that experience. The benefit of the experience is to say, yes, there is something deeper. Now let's continue to go forward until that becomes the living reality always, rather than a past experience that can be remembered and clung to. Okay? So don't make it an ego-affirming experience of look how far I've gotten, because that's not going to be beneficial. One has to be willing to let go of that and to say, yes, I've had this experience. Great. You've had that experience. Now use it to say, let's continue to go forward until that becomes the living, breathing reality always.
I hear you, and that's an important distinction. But I mean, I was actually going at it from the other direction too, saying that I heard about those experiences, and I can't really say that I've had it. So then that's a giant no in a way, and I'm wondering about that no. That's why I asked the question if enlightenment or awakening can sneak up on you, where you maybe don't need a big experience, where you could just start.
Okay. I see where you're going with that. Well, I think that, of course it's possible. Anything is possible. I can't say it's not possible that enlightenment couldn't sneak up on somebody, but all I know that is when it comes, there has to be the end of the me story. It absolutely ends 100%, And I don't think that, there are some people, they just don't have the big wow experiences along the way. Some people have a lot of phenomena. The same thing with Kundalini. Some people have a lot of phenomena with lights and, sounds and everything, and a lot of kriyas, a lot of automatic motion, a lot of hand, mudras and stuff, and some people don't. And some people may come like what happened with Eckhart Tolle. He came to a vast time in his life where the mind couldn't accept, and it was that point of I'm going to die. Well, who's going to die? Are there two me's? And just all of a sudden, for some reason, it triggered where he went out of that and into this knowing of something other. This is, so who can say? For some, they have a path and a journey that takes many years. For others, maybe it's laying low and you don't know what's going to trigger that falling away. For some, they may have all of a sudden, out of the blue, something that triggers a falling away. Like you have the story of the woman that was a nun, and she was carrying the bucket of water. and the moon was reflected in the pail of water, and when the bottom fell out, realization came. Just all of a sudden, that cognition, and boom, everything fell away. So who can say?
I don't want. I don't really want to get involved in naming too many names. So we already named Eckhart Tolle, but was he? Did he seek confirmation from somebody, or was he kind of like just realized that this has got to be it?
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think he saw it. But when things fell away for him, he said, my understanding is he sat on a park bench for quite some time, like up to a year, and just sat with things. Just sat. I think that, well, I don't want to get into, say too much about Eckhart Tolle.
No, please don't. You just say whatever you feel is right.
Get into saying too much about it, but I'm just using his example as that he wasn't necessarily following a spiritual life and wasn't looking for realization. But the fact was, circumstances happened that brought together all of these things, and big boom, and immediately triggered a falling away at that point for him. That's all I'm saying. So I can't say, that everyone has to be on a path for years and have practices, etc. For some, perhaps there can be that, but how many actually have that trigger that fall away like that in that moment?
Right,
It's very, very few, very, very few that have that. And nobody can say how many lifetimes of experience and how many lifetimes of practice and how many lifetimes of searching he'd had to that point. Maybe he had great depth and much to do, and then at that point it was the trigger needed to fulfill what was needed to be fulfilled at that point in his journey. That's all.
In one way, I think we could say that your life is your practice, and this is what God has given you, and if you somehow the truth should be obvious in some way, and probably the truth is obvious, but not by saying, "Hey, I'm the truth," but more it's obvious by the illusion of the of what we're engaged in now, and we can start to realize the illusion, And one time I was thinking that even all religions have their value, in a certain part of your life, and if anything, what's missing is the hole at the top. The hole at the top is like, where you, somehow can go to your own discovery, because religion has given you a certain set of premises and so on, and then you can live and imbibe those things, but somehow you have to discover every moment for yourself. And every guru, too, needs a kind of like a hole at the top. Every practice kind of has to dissolve. Otherwise, if every practice is something that you have to do for your whole life from now till eternity, if it's like kind of an albatross that you have to engage in forever, then there needs to be kind of like a hole at the top always, right?
Well, things fall away, when you get to past a certain point, you need certain bridges, and when you've crossed the bridge, that bridge is no longer needed, so yeah. As far as religions, there can be some benefit to them, and then also they can be a noose in some ways as well. And as far as life, yes, all of life experience can be part of your practice. I'm not talking about practices where you set aside time and have to do pujas and this and that. I'm talking about in this path, when we get practices, they're made to be done in the midst of living. Living is your practice. Living is your journey. So one is not separate from life. You can't set aside and say, this is my spiritual part of my life and this is my other part of my life. It's one life.
Talking about religion, in a way we conspire to hold each other back, because like I'm saying, okay, like the congregation or or even around a guru, people take a dim view of somebody that's kind of like breaking away, right? Why do you even around? I even had contact with some people that knew Ramana Maharshi, and somehow they didn't want to speak, because they felt like, maybe others would even say, well, why are you a teacher when you could just refer people to Ramana's teachings, and that's a long time ago, really, but still, that's in kind of like in force.
Well, Ramana never claimed to be a guru. Ramana said he wasn't a guru, but you need a guru. And why did he do that? Because Ramana was, didn't want to spend the time to work with them one-to-one, etc. Uh, he always gave them just the self-inquiry. But I think that most people didn't understand what he meant by self-inquiry. And Ramana was one of the greatest sages. I mean, very, very absolutely within non-duality, 100%. Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Sometimes, unfortunately, religions, they start out, and most religions start out because they want to come as reformers. Like Christ was a reformer of Judaism, and like Buddha was a reformer of Brahmanism, and they wanted to break through some of the illusions and delusions that had crept into the religions when the religions become more bondage, and then they do freeing. Masters come and they want to free mankind, and sometimes what they, like I said, what they say gets taken out of context and heard 180 degrees away from what they're saying and heard through the eyes of ego. And then ego wants to bring in all these rules and conditions, etc. And so they just set up another conditioned structure, which becomes, in some ways, it can be beneficial, but in other ways, it becomes another structure, a jail or a bondage. So any religion, when the founder is there, before it becomes a religion, the founder is there to break through the conditionings that have been set up and the bondage that they see that may be coming out of a religious structure. And unfortunately, what happens is they get turned into another religion.
So we're talking about a living teaching. So
teaching, yes. Yes. Once the teacher is there, then people want to think that they understand the teacher, and of course the intellect comes in. The intellectuals come in and want to define it and box it up and put it in another structure, and then it becomes again down the way it gets turned into something other than what the original teacher had in mind.
Since we talked about Ramana, this comes to my mind, that when we were talking about transmission. All right, so Ramana always used to say, or often said that Arunachala was his, the mountain was actually his guru. Or are there holy places, or is that part of the transmission, or what is? Why would the earth be stronger in one place than in another?
Because the mindset is putting it that way. When people see that a lot of places, and they go there, they put a lot of energy into that place, and then it will hold that, that mindset sees that cognition, and that's what it holds to. Why is a temple any more sacred than anywhere else? Because that's the mindset of the people going there, and they hold that, and they project that, and quantum is what quantum is. It goes in there, and a projection is there, and it holds that energy in place for that. That's all.
That's a very great explanation. It really resonates with me. I can really feel comfortable with that, and thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. But yeah, if that was Ramana's point of contact at the mountain of Arunchala, and he was there, and he could surrender 100% and give 100% there, great. That was his point of contact. That was his heart opening, and that's where he was. And he had that great love for there, and it was fabulous. It's fine, But one can have that point of contact and that heart opening for newness, numerous things. Quite possible, yes.
So you can have a heart opening for your guru, but your guru probably has a heart opening for every living being, every sentient being. And so then maybe that is the expanded version of it, right?
Yeah, perhaps, yes, yes.
I've really enjoyed speaking with you. Do you have anything you'd like to say that we missed, or?
Oh no, I think that what comes forward is what comes forward, and I never have any other projection, anything going on. If somebody doesn't ask a question or come up with something, nothing comes. It's just quiet. That's all.
No chatter.
No chat. No.
Thank you, Swami G. Really enjoyable, beautiful talk, a lot of clarification. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Namaste. It was so nice to meet you. And yes, many blessings with your journey. And it's so nice to see you having these talks and things. And I think that, not one teacher is right for everyone. Just simply not everyone will resonate here. Not everyone will resonate in another place. And so it's wonderful that you give this opportunity to many to see what's out there and what they resonate with and where they're ready to go forward in their life.
Sometimes I feel like it's overkill, and then but the actual effect of that is to drop people in on their own heart and their own discovery.
Exactly. And some teachers may come forward that may challenge some things for people, and it might be very uncomfortable at the time. And when there's that reactionary thing, look within and find out, where is this reaction coming from? And that's all.
So thank you, everybody, for coming. Never Not Here is getting real active this summer. We're going to have a traveling fall, and we'll see what will happen. So we thank, please help me thank Swami G for her appearance and for her clarifications. So again, I thank you. Namaste, Swami G.
Namaste. Thank you.